All right, today we're jumping into a really chilling true crime story, one that comes straight out of Dhaka's recent history. It's about a time when the very people you're supposed to trust, the ones sworn to protect you, well, they became the ones to fear. This is the story of the Phantom Police. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Imagine you're walking down a busy street and you just disappear. It's a terrifying thought, right? But for a few years, this wasn't just a thought. It was a grim reality for so many people in Bangladesh's capital. Folks were getting snatched in broad daylight by people who looked, acted, and sounded exactly like police officers.
So, who were these guys? I mean, how on earth did they manage to terrorize an entire city, basically hiding in plain sight? Let's get into it.
Yeah, this was not your typical criminal gang, not even close. See, their greatest weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was a uniform. All of their power, all of their leverage, it came from the trust and the authority that police disguise instantly gave them.
And the reception was honestly incredibly detailed. They had the whole kit: official-looking uniforms, fake IDs that looked totally real, handcuffs. They even had walkie-talkies to make it sound like they were communicating with a real precinct. It was a flawless performance, really, all designed to make sure you had zero doubts about who they were.
And this really gets to the core of the problem, you know? If you're just an ordinary person on the street, how could you possibly tell the difference? You just can't. This gang exploited the fundamental trust that we all place in authority figures. They took a symbol of safety and twisted it into a symbol of absolute terror. So you might be wondering, who were they targeting? Well, this was anything but random. The gang was super selective. They went after people they thought had access to serious money. We're talking business people, bankers, and especially families who had relatives working abroad. They were all prime targets for one very simple reason. The gang believed they could pay a massive ransom. And believe me, this was a highly organized operation. They had a method that was chillingly effective, and it all broke down into 4 very specific steps. Their process was just disturbingly methodical. So first up, surveillance. They would literally watch a target for days, sometimes weeks, learning every little detail of their routine. Then came the snatch. They'd do it right out in public, in a busy area, using their fake authority to take the person into custody. After that, the victim was blindfolded, moved to some secret safe house, and that's when the family would get that terrifying phone call demanding millions. And let's be perfectly clear here. This was not a bluff. The threat was absolutely real. If a family couldn't pay or wouldn't pay, the victims were tortured. And in some of the most tragic cases, they never came home at all. The stakes were literally life and death. Now, for a while, these just felt like a series of horrible but isolated incidents. But pretty soon, the crimes started happening so often, and they were so similar that it created a pattern that investigators just couldn't ignore anymore. Suddenly, high-profile cases started stacking up. You had a student abducted right from in front of her campus. A banker was snatched and held captive for an entire week. The fact that all these abductions were happening in these upscale neighborhoods like Gulshan and Hutara, well, it started to paint a very, very clear picture for the real police. And here's the irony, right? The gang's own repeated method, the thing that made them so successful, ended up being their undoing. This consistent routine, the fake cops, the same types of locations, the ransom calls, it basically created a criminal's signature. It was like their calling card. And that was the thread that the real police needed to finally start pulling this whole case together. Okay, so with a clear pattern established, the detective branch, that's the DB, and the Criminal Investigation Department, or CID, they teamed up and launched a special joint operation. The hunt for the Phantom Police was officially on. And during a series of raids on their hideouts, the authorities absolutely hit the jackpot. They found everything: the uniforms, the fake IDs, the walkie-talkies, all the tools of the trade. But the real smoking gun? It was financial. They found records, detailed records of all the ransom transactions. And that created a direct, undeniable link between the gang and their victims. The operation was a huge success. The core members of the Phantom Gang were arrested, and their reign of terror was finally brought to an end. But the investigation also uncovered something else. It turned out this group was just one piece of a much wider, more complex web of organized crime operating in the city. But even with the gang behind bars, the story doesn't just end there, because the psychological impact of these crimes, well, that left some deep and lasting scars on the entire city.
Suddenly, the whole city was forced to confront this one single chilling realization. A police uniform doesn't always equal safety. That symbol they were all taught to trust could actually be a mask for a predator. And that idea, that one realization, just fundamentally shattered public trust.
So, in response, the authorities really had to scramble to try and rebuild that broken trust. They brought in stricter security protocols. They launched these big public awareness campaigns to teach people how to actually verify an officer's identity. And, of course, they dramatically increased the presence of real police officers in those neighborhoods that had been hit the hardest. But it leaves you with a really sobering question, doesn't it? I mean, in a world where deception can be that convincing, how secure are any of us, really? Ultimately, the story of Dhaka's Phantom Police is just a stark reminder of a timeless lesson. It teaches us that being aware, having a healthy dose of skepticism, that's not paranoia. It's actually one of our most essential tools for staying safe, because sometimes the greatest danger is the one you'd never, ever suspect.